In 1932, a Tulsa kitchen kept a half-pint mason jar of brown drippings cooled near the cast iron. The family used it as cooking fat for 11 straight months. Number 16 on this list rubbed coffee grounds into a beef chuck for Sunday roast. Number 12 cracked shells into the soup pot for calcium nobody had a word for. Number 5 on this list pulled 9 hours of broth from bones your butcher tossed in the bin. None of these were banned by law. The food companies buried them because they needed grandma to buy something instead, and by 2014 the same animal fat sat on the cover of Time under the words, "Eat butter." These 25 poor man tricks were designed for one thing, making nothing into supper. Hit subscribe if any sound familiar. Let me run through the 25 banned cooking tricks scientists now say were genius. Number 25. Saving bacon grease as cooking fat. In 2014, a Harvard study published in the Annals of Internal Medicine reviewed 72 clinical trials and could not find a connection between saturated fat and heart disease. Bacon fat turned out to be roughly half monounsaturated, the same heart-friendly fat your olive oil is praised for. It carries oleic acid the way the Mediterranean diet does. Now rewind to your grandmother's kitchen, pouring hot drippings through a tin strainer into a glass jar by the stove. That was the morning ritual. A spoonful went into the cornbread. A spoonful went into a simmering pot of green beans. A spoonful greased the iron before the eggs hit. For decades, the food companies ran ads telling her to throw it out. The detail no one mentions is what the jar actually held by weight, not the smell or the cholesterol scare from the 1970s. She kept the jar by the stove anyway because nothing flavored a skillet of greens like it. Number 24. Using baking soda to soak dried beans. A metal bowl of pinto beans sat on the stove the night before supper. Cold water covered them by 2 inches. A small spoonful of baking soda stirred in. By breakfast, the skins had loosened, the water had turned cloudy, and the beans cooked in half the time. Doctors and dietitians dismissed the trick as a country shortcut that ruined the texture. Research from the USDA later confirmed the alkaline soak breaks down raffinose, the family of sugars that causes gas in beans. The soak cut cooking time by up to 40%. Your great-grandmother soaked her beans because the family had to be at the table on time, and a pot of pintos that took 90 minutes after a soak fed 7 of you with a quarter of cornbread on the side. Number 23. Making gravy from dry toasted flour. Stirring dry flour above a slow flame in the heaviest skillet, keeping the spoon moving. No fat, no shortcut. The flour darkened from pale to paper bag, then pecan, then dark chocolate. That toasted flour became the base for gravy, gumbo, and stew. Cookbooks called the technique crude. Restaurants pushed packaged gravy mix instead. That technique is the Maillard reaction, the chemistry behind roasted coffee and seared steak. Food scientists confirmed dry toasted flour develops deep, nutty flavor compounds without the fat of a butter roux. The kitchen called it browning the flour. The chemists call it melanoidin formation. Same gravy, different vocabulary. Number 22. Saving pork fat to render down for lard. Rendering pork trimmings above a slow flame from one morning to the next until 2 quarts of clean white lard sat cooling on the counter. Pie crust went in lard. Biscuits went in lard. Fried potatoes went in lard. The American Heart Association spent 40 years telling families to throw it out and buy hydrogenated shortening instead. The chemists later learned the trans fats in early shortening were worse for the arteries than the lard they replaced. The Siri-Torino meta-analysis pulled 21 studies and 347,000 people and found no clear link between saturated fat and heart disease. Lard turned out to be more than half monounsaturated. The tin can of lard next to the salt cellar stayed on the supper table for 40 more years. Number 21. Making vinegar from apple peels and cores. The smell of fermenting fruit drifted through the kitchen for 6 weeks straight. The peels and cores went into a half-gallon glass jar. Sugar water covered them. A square of cheesecloth held the jar shut, and the bottle sat on the icebox the way a starter does. By the end, the liquid turned amber, sour, faintly sweet. It strained through a coffee filter and went into a bottle. Supermarket vinegar pushed homemade out of most American kitchens. Microbiologists later confirmed that raw fruit scrap vinegar develops the same acetic acid bacteria, the so-called mother, sold today in wellness aisles. The household fermenting apple peels was bottling a probiotic from the trash of last week's pie. Number 20. Using buttermilk to soak fried chicken. Cut-up chicken sat in a deep ceramic bowl with buttermilk covering it. Salt and a few grindings of black pepper. The bowl went into the icebox until morning. The meat came out pale, soft, and bent without breaking when you picked up a piece. The technique was dismissed as Southern country plate of last resort cooking. Food scientists later ran the lab work. Buttermilk sits at a pH around 4.5, acidic enough to gently denature the surface proteins like a slow marinade does, but soft enough that the meat does not turn mushy the way it does in vinegar. The lactic acid loosens the collagen. The casein coats the surface and holds the breading on. The cheapest tenderizer in any kitchen now shows up in 3 Michelin star restaurants under the name lacto-fermented marinade. The chicken was always tender. The PhD just confirmed why. Number 19. Using cornmeal as a breading instead of flour, shaking buttermilk-soaked chicken pieces in a brown paper bag of yellow cornmeal, a little flour, salt, and pepper. The pieces went into a hot iron skillet of melted lard, 10 cents worth on the counter from the same can the cook used all winter. The crust crackled when the chicken hit the oil and stayed crisp 2 hours later on the plate. Food magazines in the 1970s called cornmeal coarse and rural. White flour breading was sold as the modern way for 50 cents a box. Frying research at North Carolina A&T showed cornmeal absorbs less oil than plain flour, holds more moisture in the meat, and stays crunchier when you bite into it. The protein in the cornmeal forms a tighter seal around the chicken like a thin shell. The higher starch content browns into a deeper crust. Every Southern grandmother already knew this without a lab. The seasoned skillet still smells faintly of that browning when you open the cabinet door 40 years later. Number 18. Stretching hamburger with stale bread. Tearing 2 slices of yesterday's bread into a small dish of milk and soaking them soft. The wet bread was worked into the beef with an egg, half a yellow onion finely diced, salt, pepper. 1 small pound became a meatloaf that fed 6 around the table. Family magazines called it filler. Restaurants called it cheap. The home kitchen was building what culinary scientists call a panade. The starch and dairy in the soaked bread bind to the meat proteins like a sponge and trap moisture inside the loaf. Controlled tests confirmed it. A meatloaf with a panade lost almost half its moisture less than one without. The pan hit the trivet on a midweek night, and the loaf fed everyone at the table with 2 slices left over for sandwiches the next day. Number 17. Saving stale bread for Sunday bread pudding. The United Nations now counts bread as the most wasted food on Earth. Food scientists call the staling process retrogradation, the recrystallization of starch that pushes moisture out and makes bread hard. Hard bread absorbs cream the way fresh bread cannot, which is why a good bread pudding starts with bread you would have thrown out. Now rewind to your grandmother's kitchen. The heels and crusts went into a paper bag all week. By Saturday, there were enough to fill the baking dish. The bread tore into rough pieces, soaked in a custard of milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla, and slid into the oven. It came out caramelized on top and tender underneath. Sunday dessert from Tuesday's leftovers. By 1958, the trick that fed Tennessee farm families on almost nothing was being sold in Brooklyn bakeries for $9 a slice. Number 16. Using coffee grounds to rub a tough beef chuck. Number 16 on this list turned a tough cut into the centerpiece of your Sunday dinner for 40 cents. The cold leftover grounds from the morning percolator were saved in a tin can by the stove. They mixed with brown sugar, salt, paprika, and pepper. The mixture rubbed hard into the surface of a beef chuck or brisket. The roast sat in the icebox overnight, then went into a slow oven at 300 degrees for 5 hours. Your crust came out dark, savory, faintly bittersweet. Charcoal grill culture in the 1990s laughed at the idea. A 2015 study from Meat Science Labs at Texas A&M confirmed that the chlorogenic acid in coffee gently denatures the surface proteins of beef, and the polyphenols in dark roast deepen the Maillard browning during slow cooking. Food and Wine put coffee-rubbed brisket on its cover. Your grandmother priced the whole roast at 40 cents and fed 8 people on it through Sunday dinner and 2 weekday lunches. By the way, if you want the rest of the tricks the labs are now confirming, I put a printable recipe guide together. The link is below this video, and it walks through more like these. Number 15. Saving green peanuts to boil in salted water. Green peanuts in the shell, salt by the handful, and water enough to cover. The pot simmered all afternoon. The peanuts came out soft, briny, warm in your hand. You ate them on the porch from a paper cone. The shells dropped into a bucket at your feet. Coastal grocery chains refused to stock them, calling them a poor crop and a regional embarrassment. Then food chemists ran the analysis. The boiling raises the resveratrol content of peanuts by up to 4 times, the same antioxidant that put red wine on health news covers. It increases the bioavailable concentration of polyphenols and shifts the protein profile toward more digestible forms. The crop the supermarkets called poor turned out to carry more measurable health compounds than any roasted version sold in a can on your shelf. Number 14. Making sauerkraut in a back porch crock. Every September, by the bushel, cabbage came in from the garden. It was shredded thin on a wooden board, layered into a 5-gallon stoneware crock with coarse salt, and pressed down with a clean stone wrapped in cheesecloth. The crock sat in the back porch where the temperature stayed cool. Within 3 days, brine had risen above the cabbage. Within 3 weeks, the kitchen had enough sauerkraut for the entire winter. Through the 1960s, the food industry pushed canned sauerkraut and called the crock unsanitary. The Department of Agriculture warned about home fermentation in pamphlets. Then microbiology caught up. A 2018 crossover trial published in the journal Microbiome followed 87 volunteers eating fresh sauerkraut for 4 weeks, and researchers documented measurable shifts in gut bacterial diversity that the volunteers carried forward for at least a month after they stopped. Lactic acid bacteria found in the brine, including Lactoplantobacillus plantarum and Leuconostoc, are now grown in laboratories and sold as probiotic capsules for $40 a bottle. Sauerkraut researchers at Frontiers in Microbiology mapped 63 distinct bacterial species in a single household crock. Your grandmother, lifting the stone every morning to check the brine line, was managing 63 species of bacteria with 1 cabbage and a fistful of salt. The crock was passed down through 3 generations of the same kitchen. The cabbage was free, the salt was a few cents, and the cure was the bacteria themselves. There was no canning, no electricity, no refrigeration. The brine kept the cabbage edible from October through April. The same kraut that cost nothing on the porch is now sold in Brooklyn delicatessens for $14 a pint, marketed as living food. The crock smelled faintly of vinegar and warm cabbage every time the screen door opened, and the family ate from it from Halloween through Easter without once running out. Number 13. Using cast iron to simmer down tomatoes. Your skillet was heavy, black, seasoned smooth from 40 years of use. The fresh tomatoes from the August garden were halved and slid in with a little bacon grease. They simmered down for an hour into a thick, dark red sauce that went over your rice at supper. Modern cookware ads in the 1970s told housewives to switch to nonstick aluminum and called black iron pans heavy and primitive. Then, a 1986 study in the Journal of the American Dietetic Association showed that acidic foods cooked in seasoned iron absorb measurable amounts of iron from the pan itself. Spaghetti sauce went from 0.6 milligrams of iron per 100 grams to 5.7 milligrams. That is roughly a 10-fold increase right into your supper. Your grandmother cooking tomatoes in her old pan was fortifying her family with bioavailable iron at every meal. Anemia rates in coal mining communities ran lower than the average rural rates of the period, and the old county health surveys never could explain why. The skillet had your answer. Number 12. Saving eggshells to drop in the soup pot. The eggshell trick dropped clean shells into the simmering pot to add the calcium nobody yet had a name for. The shells were rinsed, baked dry in a low oven, and crumbled in with your broth. They simmered roughly an hour, then strained out before you ladled. Food columns in the 1960s called the practice rural superstition and warned against bacterial contamination. Then a 2003 study in the International Journal of Clinical Pharmacology Research found that eggshell powder is a bioavailable source of calcium, with absorption rates of 45% compared to 39% for synthetic calcium carbonate supplements. A 2018 paper in Bone and Mineral Research showed measurable increases in bone mineral density in postmenopausal women using eggshell calcium with vitamin D. A single shell provides more than 2 grams of calcium, almost double your daily requirement. The shells turned the broth faintly chalky on the back of the spoon, and the bones in her hand stayed straight into her 80s. Number 11. Using cider vinegar to soak tough greens. The bushel of collards from the truck garden was bitter and tough on your fingers. The leaves went into the kitchen sink filled with cool water, a few splashes of cider vinegar, and a tablespoon of salt. They sat for 20 minutes. The vinegar settled the dirt, killed the bugs, and started softening the cellulose. Then they were rinsed and braised low and slow with a smoked pork bone for 2 hours. The bitterness was gone. The texture was velvet on your tongue. Cooking shows in the 1980s pushed steamed vegetables and dropped the long braise altogether. Food chemists at the University of Tennessee then confirmed that the mild acid pre-soak hydrolyzes the toughest pectin bonds in collards and reduces the bitter glucosinolate compounds by up to 20%. Researchers at the University of Mississippi found that low and slow braising preserves more carotenoids than steaming because the cooking liquid holds them in solution. The greens were never the problem. Your grandmother braised a bushel of collards for 2 hours every Sunday and fed the whole table from 1 ham bone and $3 of greens. Number 10. Saving pickle brine for the next batch. Your mason jar of cucumbers was finished. The brine left at the bottom poured back into a clean jar with a fresh batch of vegetables. Carrots went in next, then green beans, then small whole onions. The same brine pickled 3 or 4 batches before it was finally splashed into a salad dressing or a pot of greens. Through the 1990s, food safety pamphlets told you to throw the brine away after one use. But microbiology papers later showed something different. A naturally fermented brine carries lactic acid bacteria in concentrations that rival the commercial probiotics on your pharmacy shelf. A 2025 community trial in Pakistan followed women eating fermented brine pickles for 12 weeks and documented improvements in gut microbiota diversity, immune markers, and inflammatory profiles. The brine you would have thrown away turned out to carry the same lactobacillus strains that show up in $300 wellness supplements. The same jar that pickled 4 batches of vegetables for a quarter cost the equivalent of a $50 probiotic bottle today. Number 9. Saving a hog by salt curing it in a wooden box. The hog came home in November. The hams and shoulders went into a wooden box lined with coarse salt, dark molasses, and a little saltpeter from the feed store. The salt drew out the moisture day by day. After 6 weeks, the meat had turned dense, rosy, and dry, and it hung from the smokehouse rafters. It kept all winter without your icebox. Cured pork like that fed coal mining and farming families for centuries. Through the 1980s, public health campaigns warned that homemade cured meats cause cancer because of the nitrates. But chemistry labs at the Institute of Food Technologists later ran the math. Spinach and beets contain more naturally occurring nitrates per serving than a slice of country ham on your plate. The same nitrate-reducing bacteria that cure meat live in your saliva and convert vegetables into nitrites every time you chew a salad. The 2020 review in Nutrients put it plainly. The link between traditional cured pork and cancer in normal kitchen quantities was statistically thin. Your grandfather salting hams in the back room had been making the safest preserved protein in the household. Number 8. Saving pot liquor after cooking greens. The collards or turnip greens lifted out of the simmering pot and went onto your platter. The dark green liquid left behind poured into a glass jar and saved. It went into your cornbread the next morning. It went over your rice at supper. It was sipped from a coffee cup with hot pepper sauce when you needed it. Through the 1970s, home economics teachers told families to drain the greens and pour the liquid down your sink. They called it dirty water. Research from the University of Georgia and a Spanish study in food chemistry later confirmed that 50% of the flavonoids and 60% of the vitamin C from cooked greens leach into the cooking water. Pot liquor carried iron, vitamin A, vitamin K, calcium, and potassium in higher concentrations than the greens themselves. Your grandmother who saved it was rescuing the most concentrated nutrient stream in the entire meal. A coffee cup of pot liquor with crumbled cornbread sat on her counter as breakfast for half the men headed to the second shift. Number 7. Using blackstrap molasses on biscuits and beans. The dark, almost black molasses came in a glass jug from your corner store. A spoonful went over hot biscuits. A spoonful stirred into a simmering pot of pinto beans. A spoonful went into your cornbread batter. White sugar replaced it in most kitchens by the 1960s, and food companies dismissed molasses as an old-fashioned sweetener with a heavy taste. The nutrition databases later caught up. A single tablespoon of blackstrap molasses contains around 20% of the daily iron you need, plus calcium, magnesium, potassium, and selenium. A 2020 in vitro study from Sri Lanka measured the iron in blackstrap as 85% bioavailable, particularly in the presence of vitamin C from a side of greens. White sugar contains 0 of those minerals. Your grandmother sweetening biscuits with molasses was sweetening with iron. The sugar bowl on her table was a multivitamin nobody had bothered to read. Number 6. Stretching a dime with liver and onions. The slice of beef liver came home from the butcher for 15 cents. It was rolled in seasoned flour, pan-fried in hot bacon drippings, and laid over a heap of caramelized onions. It cost a dime and fed 4 around the table. Through the 1980s, the dish was pushed off American menus as old-fashioned and unappealing, and per capita liver consumption fell more than 70%. And nutrition science came back to it. A National Geographic survey of organ meat research called liver the single most nutrient-dense food on the planet. A 3-ounce serving carries 6 times the daily vitamin A of any leafy green, 12 times the riboflavin of beefsteak, and almost 10 times the vitamin B12 of a chicken breast. Recent peer-reviewed work in the Journal of Animal Science found that 1 serving of liver covers more than half your recommended intake of copper, selenium, and choline. The dish dismissed as old folks' food turned out to be the cheapest concentrated multivitamin in any butcher case. Your grandmother put it on the plate because nothing else stretched a dime that far. Number 5. Saving bones to simmer for 9 hours. A chicken back, a beef shank, and a knuckle saved in butcher paper sat in a Birmingham kitchen well before sunrise with 8 cups of cold water poured over them. Your grandmother drank the broth from a coffee mug at breakfast or fed it to a child who would not eat. The chicken carcass from Sunday dinner, the ham bone left over from Saturday's beans, the beef knuckle saved in butcher paper at the back of the icebox. They went into a heavy enamel pot with a splash of cider vinegar, half an onion, 1 celery stalk, a bay leaf if the kitchen had one. The pot stayed at a low murmur all day on the stove. The broth that came out was thick enough to gel in your icebox. Through the 1980s, hospital dietitians called it folk medicine. By 2015, it sold in Manhattan for $9 a paper cup. Researchers at the International Journal of Food Sciences confirmed that long-simmered bone broth releases collagen, glycine, proline, and bioavailable minerals into the liquid you drink. The amino acids are the same ones sold today as joint and gut supplements. The pot held 7 days of breakfasts inside 1 chicken carcass and 3 cents of vinegar. Number 4. Using chicken feet to thicken the stock. The feet arrived home in a brown paper bag from the butcher for almost nothing, sometimes free if you knew the man behind the counter. They were scalded in boiling water, peeled clean of the yellow outer skin, and dropped into your stock pot with the rest of the chicken bones. They simmered for 6 hours. The broth that came out was thick, glossy, gelled into a brown jelly when it cooled in your icebox. Black, Mexican-American, and Caribbean households kept the practice through the lean decades, while most American grocery stores stopped stocking the feet altogether. And food scientists at the USDA later confirmed why the cooks were right. Chicken feet are mostly skin, tendon, and cartilage. They release more collagen and glycine per ounce than any other part of the bird. A 2019 paper in the Journal of Food Science measured the gelatin yield of feet at almost 3 times that of a whole chicken carcass on your counter. The same collagen sells today as $10 capsules in pharmacies. Your aunt or your mother chilled the stock overnight and used the brown jelly the next morning to thicken a Tuesday gumbo for 10 cents a quart. Number 3. Saving onion skins for broth color and depth. The papery brown skins of yellow onions were saved in a paper bag tucked behind your icebox, dropped in every time the cook chopped a yellow Spanish or Vidalia for supper. No exceptions. Even the last papery layer that fell on the cutting board. By the end of the week, there were 2 heaping cupfuls in the bag, light as feathers and dry as old newspaper, ready for the stock pot. They went into your stock pot with the chicken bones. They turned the broth a deep amber gold and added a savory note no fresh onion ever produced. Through the 1990s, glossy food magazines told you to compost the skins and start fresh every time. Research in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry then measured the quercetin content of onion skin at nearly 30 times higher than the white flesh of the onion underneath. Quercetin is a flavonoid now studied for its anti-inflammatory and immune-supportive properties. A 2018 paper from Spain confirmed that simmering the skins releases bioavailable quercetin into your broth in measurable concentrations. The forgotten reason this works is the gap between the layers. 30 times more flavonoid in the brown wrapper than in the white flesh underneath. The grandmother saving the skins was extracting the most concentrated antioxidant fraction of the whole vegetable, and the trash from one kitchen was the wellness ingredient of the next century in yours. Number 2. Making a sourdough starter on the windowsill. Your mason jar of flour and water sat on the windowsill above the kitchen sink. It was fed every morning with a spoonful of flour and a spoonful of water. The wild yeast from the air, from the flour, from the cook's own hands did the rest. After a week, the starter was bubbling. After a month, it was strong enough to leaven your loaf with no commercial yeast at all. Industrial bread companies in the 1970s pushed packaged dry yeast and called sourdough slow and unreliable. And gut researchers at the Food Science Institute later confirmed what every old kitchen had quietly been doing. Sourdough fermentation breaks down phytic acid, the compound that blocks mineral absorption in your gut. It pre-digests gluten through long fermentation, which is why some people who cannot eat commercial bread can eat traditional sourdough. The bread had a lower glycemic index and higher mineral availability than any loaf on your supermarket shelf. The starter was a free, self-renewing source of better bread than the bakery ever sold. Number 1. Making winter parch corn from late summer kernels. The late summer corn was shucked and the kernels sliced off the cob with whatever knife the cook had. They spread on a cotton sheet on the porch under the August sun for 3 days, turned twice a day until the husks were dry. By the end of the week, the kernels were hard as gravel, stored in a tin can at the back of your pantry. In winter, they were toasted in a dry iron skillet until they puffed open and browned at the edges. They were eaten hot from the hand, salted, taken hunting in a pocket, fed to a sick child of yours when nothing else stayed down. Settlers learned the trick from Cherokee and Iroquois cooks who had been parching corn for centuries before any wagon arrived. By the 1970s, packaged corn snacks pushed parched corn out of every American kitchen, but nutritionists came back to it. The slow drying preserves the corn's resistant starch, which behaves in your gut like dietary fiber and feeds beneficial bacteria. The toasting raises the antioxidant load through Maillard browning. Parched corn has more protein per ounce than commercial corn chips and roughly a third the fat. The kernels in the tin can were your grandmother's original protein bar. Eating liver, kidneys, and other organ meats weekly was routine in the 1960s households before factory farming and supermarket convenience made such foods seem primitive. Muscle meats became the only acceptable protein while organs were relegated to pet food. Nutritional science now recognizes organ meats as the most nutrient-dense foods available, containing concentrated vitamins and minerals that muscle tissue cannot provide. Liver alone delivers more vitamin A, B12, folate, copper, and iron per ounce than any other food, supporting energy production and preventing deficiencies affecting millions today. Heart provides CoQ10 essential for cellular energy. Kidneys offer selenium and B vitamins in exceptional quantities. The generation that regularly consumed these foods experienced fewer deficiency-related health problems, despite having less access to supplements. What seemed like poverty eating was actually nutritional abundance that affluence foolishly abandoned. Using cabbage leaves as wraps for stuffed vegetables was a natural and economical way to hold ingredients together during times of scarcity. Large cabbage leaves served as edible containers for mixtures of grains, vegetables, and sometimes small amounts of meat. Wrapping dishes this way conserved cooking vessels and made serving easier. The leaves added a mild, fresh flavor and extra fiber to meals. Cabbage was widely available, inexpensive, and hearty, making it a perfect vegetable to support this technique. Stuffed cabbage leaves were filling and visually appealing, offering a sense of comfort despite limited ingredients. This method also reflected the wartime emphasis on stretching every resource without waste. Many families passed down recipes that used cabbage wraps, keeping the tradition alive long after rationing ended. Revisiting this trick today reveals how simple, affordable vegetables became heroes in kitchens facing adversity. Making fluffy mashed potatoes by adding hot milk gradually was a classic technique to avoid gluey or heavy mashed potatoes. Betty Crocker emphasized warming the milk before mixing it slowly into cooked potatoes, which helped the starches absorb liquid evenly and created a smooth, light texture. Cold milk shocked the potatoes and caused them to seize up, resulting in a dense and sticky mash. This technique was especially important when potatoes were a staple food and needed to be prepared just right to satisfy hungry families. The gradual addition allowed for better control over consistency and avoided watery or overly stiff results. While simple, it was a mark of good home cooking skill in mid-century kitchens. Rediscovering this trick can turn ordinary mashed potatoes into a creamy delight worthy of any dinner table. Fermenting foods without commercial starters or precise temperature control seemed reckless to food scientists promoting standardized production during the 1960s. Wild fermentation relied on naturally occurring bacteria and yeasts that authorities viewed as unpredictable and dangerous. Traditional fermenters understood that proper salt concentration, anaerobic conditions, and patience created environments where beneficial organisms outcompeted harmful ones without external intervention. The resulting diversity of probiotic strains far exceeded anything commercial starters could provide, creating products with complex flavors and genuine health benefits. Sourdough bread made from wild-captured yeasts offered superior nutrition compared to commercial yeast versions. Naturally fermented pickles and sauerkraut contained living cultures that pasteurized products couldn't match. The wisdom embedded in traditional fermentation practices predated scientific understanding but achieved what laboratory methods later struggled to replicate. Using gelatin to set leftover meat juices was an ingenious way to transform scraps into a new dish that stretched ingredients further. After roasting or boiling meat, the remaining juices were collected and combined with gelatin, which was more commonly used in wartime cooking than it is now. This mixture was poured into molds and refrigerated, creating savory aspects that could be sliced and served. These dishes added variety to meals and made use of parts that might otherwise be discarded. Gelatin helped preserve the nutrients and flavors, providing protein-rich options even when fresh meat was limited. The resulting aspects were often mixed with chopped vegetables, eggs, or bits of meat, making them more appealing and hearty. This technique reflected the resourcefulness of wartime kitchens, where wasting any part of food was unacceptable. Aspics served cold also offered a refreshing change in warmer months. Although gelatin dishes have faded from modern menus, they once held a respected place at tables across America. Rediscovering this trick shows how creativity and respect for ingredients helped families survive with less. How to soften brown sugar with a slice of bread was an old but incredibly effective method to fix hardened sugar that saved countless cooks from frustration. Brown sugar, with its natural molasses content, tends to dry out and form solid lumps when left exposed to air. Betty Crocker recommended placing a slice of fresh bread in the container with the sugar and sealing it tight for a day or two. The moisture from the bread would transfer to the sugar, restoring its soft, crumbly texture without damaging flavor. This simple kitchen hack meant no waste and no need to buy new sugar, which was particularly important during rationing periods. It was a household secret passed down through generations and featured in many mid-century cookbooks. Today, people might reach for microwaves or commercial softening products, but the bread trick remains an all-natural, cost-free solution that really works. It also teaches patience and resourcefulness in the kitchen. Cooking with beef tallow was standard practice in restaurants and home kitchens before health campaigns convinced Americans that vegetable oils were superior. McDonald's famously switched from tallow to vegetable oil for frying in 1990 after years of pressure, and customers immediately noticed the difference in taste. Scientists now understand that tallow's saturated fat structure makes it remarkably stable at high temperatures, resisting the oxidation that creates harmful compounds in polyunsaturated oils during frying. The fatty acid profile closely resembles human fat composition, making it easily utilized by the body. Tallow provided vitamins A, D, E, and K in forms that plant oils cannot deliver. The switch to vegetable oils may have increased inflammation and oxidative stress in populations consuming fried foods regularly. Those crispy fries and fried chicken from the 1960s weren't just tastier. They were cooked in fat that science now recognizes as genuinely healthier for high-heat applications. Dehydrating fruits for long-term storage was a clever preservation method that helped families save their garden bounty for the winter months. Fresh fruits like apples, berries, and peaches were sliced thin and dried to remove moisture, preventing spoilage. This process concentrated the sweetness and flavor while extending shelf life without refrigeration. Dehydrated fruits were used in baking, stews, and snacks, adding natural sugars and vitamins to otherwise plain wartime diets. The practice required patience but paid off by providing nutritious ingredients when fresh produce was unavailable. Many families set up simple drying racks in sunny windows or outdoors during the warmer seasons. Dehydration also reduced bulk and weight, making fruits easier to store in limited pantry spaces. This preservation technique was a testament to the resourcefulness of home cooks determined to maximize their harvest. Today, dried fruits remain popular, but the wartime origin highlights how necessity fostered smart food conservation strategies. Using potato water to thicken soups and stews naturally was a clever and economical way to avoid flour or cornstarch as thickening agents. When boiling potatoes, the starchy water left behind was often saved and added to soups or stews to create a velvety texture without needing extra ingredients. Betty Crocker's recipes encouraged this practice as a resourceful method during times when pantry staples were limited or expensive. The potato water provided a subtle richness and body, enhancing the mouthfeel of broths and reducing waste in the kitchen. This trick was especially important during the Depression and wartime rationing, when stretching ingredients was essential. It also allowed cooks to keep recipes simple and gluten-free before dietary restrictions became widely known. The use of potato water as a thickener brought a natural creaminess to dishes, transforming humble soups into hearty meals. Today, many have forgotten this straightforward technique, but it remains a valuable, zero-cost way to improve soups and stews with minimal effort. Soaking grains and beans overnight before cooking was dismissed as unnecessary fussiness by convenience-focused 1960s food writers promoting quick cooking methods. Modern recipes skip this traditional step entirely, treating it as wasted time. Nutrition science has revealed that soaking activates enzymes that break down phytic acid, a compound that binds minerals and prevents their absorption. Unsoaked grains and legumes can actually deplete mineral stores rather than nourish, creating deficiencies despite apparent adequate intake. The soaking process also begins breaking down complex starches and proteins, improving digestibility and reducing the gas and bloating many people experience. Traditional cultures worldwide practiced soaking, sprouting, or fermenting grains precisely because ancestral wisdom recognized what modern shortcuts ignore. Grandmothers who started their beans the night before weren't being inefficient. They were unlocking nutrition that quick-cooked versions simply cannot provide. Boiling potatoes with their skins to retain nutrients was a practical trick to maximize the nutritional value during rationing. Removing skins before cooking often wasted the fiber and vitamins that resided in and just under the potato skin. By boiling them whole with the skins on, families kept more nutrients intact, making every bite count. This method also reduced preparation time and minimized waste in kitchens where every resource mattered. After cooking, the skins were peeled off easily, sometimes used in other dishes or composted. Potatoes were a staple wartime food due to their availability and ability to grow in many regions. This simple step ensured that their health benefits were not lost in the cooking process. The technique showed how attention to detail in the kitchen could stretch limited food into a more nourishing meal. Today, many cooks appreciate this method for both nutrition and flavor, keeping a small wartime secret alive. Reviving stale bread with a damp towel and oven heat was a clever way to avoid waste and enjoy fresh-tasting bread longer. Rather than tossing hard or dried-out loaves, Betty Crocker recommended wrapping the bread in a slightly damp kitchen towel and placing it in a warm oven for a few minutes. The steam created would soften the crust and refresh the crumb, making the bread enjoyable again for sandwiches or toast. This simple technique was essential when bread was a precious commodity, especially during rationing and economic hardship. It gave home cooks a second chance to use leftovers without sacrificing quality or taste. The trick was easy enough for beginners and made a big difference in reducing food waste. Today, many forget this old-school method, relying on buying fresh bread instead. Bringing it back not only saves money, but also reconnects us with a time when nothing edible was wasted. Simmering bones for hours to make rich broth seemed wasteful to efficiency-minded 1960s homemakers being sold canned alternatives. Campbell's and other manufacturers promised convenience while dismissing homemade stock as unnecessary labor. Modern nutrition research has vindicated the old ways, revealing that bone broth delivers collagen, glycine, and minerals in bioavailable forms that support gut health, joint function, and skin elasticity. The gelatin released during long simmering creates protein structures that help heal intestinal lining damaged by processed foods. Glucosamine extracted naturally from cartilage provides joint support without expensive supplements. Grandmothers who refused to throw away chicken carcasses or beef bones weren't being cheap. They were practicing nutritional wisdom that pharmaceutical companies now bottle and sell for premium prices. The stock pot simmering on the back burner represented genuine wealth that no convenience product could replicate. Stretching meatloaf with oats or breadcrumbs was a common tactic to make meat supplies go further during the shortages. When meat was scarce and expensive, people found that adding oats or breadcrumbs bulked up the mixture, making a smaller amount of ground meat feed a whole family. These fillers were inexpensive and readily available, making them perfect wartime kitchen helpers. Oats added texture and absorbed flavors, while breadcrumbs helped bind the loaf together, keeping it moist and filling. Seasonings and vegetables mixed in also helped improve the taste and nutritional value. This clever trick allowed households to serve a classic comfort food without using as much precious meat. It also introduced more fiber and whole grains into the diet, which was an unintended bonus. The stretched meatloaf became a symbol of frugality and culinary ingenuity, showing how people adapted familiar recipes to hard times. It was a meal that provided warmth and sustenance when resources were limited. Trying this method today offers a glimpse into how much thought went into conserving food during those challenging years. Making frosted glass jars to store leftovers was a clever way to keep food fresher longer using everyday kitchen supplies. Before airtight plastic containers became commonplace, Betty Crocker's guide suggested frosting glass jars with a layer of wax paper or parchment on the inside to create a moisture barrier. This helped prevent leftover foods from drying out or absorbing unwanted odors in the fridge. The slightly frosted surface also reduced condensation buildup, which was a major cause of early spoilage in cold storage. This method was especially popular during wartime rationing and the Depression, when stretching meals and saving leftovers was critical. Housewives took pride in preserving food quality as long as possible, and this little trick gave their meals a second life without needing special containers. Today, with plastic everywhere, this elegant and eco-friendly solution is often overlooked. Bringing it back not only saves money but also adds a nostalgic charm to food storage. Eating eggs daily was condemned by health authorities who believed dietary cholesterol directly caused heart disease. The American Heart Association warned families to limit eggs to 3 per week, treating them as dangerous indulgences rather than nutritional powerhouses. Modern research has completely reversed this position, finding no connection between egg consumption and cardiovascular risk in healthy individuals. The cholesterol in eggs actually helps the body produce hormones, build cell membranes, and synthesize vitamin D. Eggs provide complete protein with all essential amino acids, plus choline critical for brain function that most Americans lack. The yolks contain lutein and zeaxanthin that protect aging eyes from macular degeneration. Farm families who ate eggs daily from their backyard flocks weren't shortening their lives. They were consuming one of nature's most perfect foods. The decades of egg restriction may have contributed to widespread choline deficiency, now linked to liver disease and cognitive decline. Creating homemade mustard from mustard seeds was a clever, cost-saving way to add flavor when store-bought condiments were scarce. Mustard seeds were inexpensive and could be ground at home to make fresh mustard pastes of varying heat and intensity. This homemade version was used to season meats, dress vegetables, and enliven sandwiches. Making mustard from scratch gave cooks control over the ingredients and helped avoid reliance on rationed or imported products. Mustard's sharpness also helped mask the blandness or substitutions often found in wartime dishes. Many families learned to prepare and store their own mustard, turning a simple seed into a pantry essential. This practice encouraged self-sufficiency and brought bold flavor to otherwise plain meals. Homemade mustard's popularity during the war reminds us that small touches can make a big difference in food enjoyment, especially when resources are tight. Soaking celery in ice water to restore crispness was a simple but ingenious fridge hack that helped vintage kitchens keep their produce fresh and crunchy longer. Celery often loses its crunch quickly, especially when stored improperly or left out too long. Betty Crocker recommended soaking the celery stalks in a bowl of ice water for about an hour before use, which would revitalize wilted celery by rehydrating the cells and firming up the texture. This was an essential trick for home cooks who relied heavily on fresh vegetables in their salads and soups, but did not have access to refrigeration as efficient as today's models. The crisp celery made every meal feel fresher and more satisfying, preventing waste in households where every bit of food mattered. This quick refresh technique was widely taught in community cookbooks and cooking classes, but over time, people forgot the simple power of ice water for produce. Rediscovering this trick can save money and add that needed snap to your dishes. Adding generous amounts of butter or bacon fat to vegetables was considered nutritional sabotage during the low-fat obsession emerging in the 1960s. Health experts insisted vegetables should be steamed plain or eaten raw to maximize their benefits. Research now confirms that fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K require dietary fat for proper absorption, meaning naked vegetables deliver far less nutrition than those prepared with traditional fats. Carotenoids in carrots, lycopene in tomatoes, and other crucial compounds pass through the digestive system largely unutilized without accompanying fat. Grandmothers who fried green beans in bacon drippings or sautéed spinach in butter weren't ruining healthy food. They were dramatically increasing its nutritional availability. The practice also made vegetables palatable enough that children actually ate them willingly. Science now recommends exactly what common sense already knew. Some fat makes everything about vegetables work better. Making war ration sandwich spreads was a clever way to turn limited ingredients into something satisfying. People would blend canned fish, often salmon or mackerel, with whatever vegetables were on hand, like pickles or onions. Mayonnaise substitutes made from rationed ingredients helped bind it all together. This mixture stretched thinly over bread, turning simple sandwiches into meals that could fill bellies without breaking wartime restrictions. The beauty of these spreads was their adaptability. If fresh produce was scarce, canned or preserved vegetables stepped in. The result was a flavorful, nutritious option that made the most of pantry staples. These spreads were also easy to prepare, which helped busy families feed themselves quickly. They became a staple at lunchtime tables across the country, proving that resourcefulness could turn the leanest rations into something worth eating. The practice encouraged creativity and minimized waste, both essential during the war. Today, these simple sandwich spreads remind us of a time when making do was not just a choice, but a necessity. Trying out these recipes can give us a taste of resilience and cleverness from kitchens of the past. Preserving herbs in oil for longer freshness was a smart pantry trick, cherished in vintage kitchens to keep garden herbs usable well beyond their natural shelf life. Instead of letting herbs wilt or dry out quickly, home cooks would finely chop fresh herbs like parsley, thyme, or rosemary and pack them tightly into clean glass jars. Then they would cover the herbs completely with olive oil or vegetable oil, sealing the jar tightly to prevent air exposure. This method created a flavorful, herb-infused oil that could be used in cooking or as a finishing touch for dishes. Not only did this technique extend the herbs' usability through winter months, but it also captured their fresh flavors in a convenient form. This old-fashioned preservation trick was especially valuable before modern freezing and refrigeration methods were widespread. It allowed families to enjoy the taste of summer herbs year-round without the cost or waste of constantly buying fresh produce. Rediscovering this method today offers a delicious way to add fresh herb flavor to everyday meals with a touch of nostalgic practicality. Heavy salting of meat for preservation was abandoned when refrigeration became universal, and health authorities began warning about sodium consumption. The practice seemed unnecessary when freezers could preserve food indefinitely without additives. Yet salt curing did far more than prevent spoilage. It created beneficial compounds, developed complex flavors, and improved the nutritional profile of preserved meats in ways freezing never could. The curing process encouraged beneficial bacteria while inhibiting pathogens, creating fermented products with probiotic potential. Salt-preserved meats developed concentrated flavors, requiring smaller portions to satisfy, potentially reducing overall consumption. Traditional hams and bacons prepared with proper salt curing contained enzymes and compounds that modern quick-cured versions lack entirely. The craft of salt preservation represented accumulated wisdom about food chemistry that industrial shortcuts eliminated while claiming improvement. Substituting butter with bacon drippings for cooking was a tasty and efficient way to replace scarce fats. Butter was rationed during World War II, forcing cooks to seek alternatives that could provide flavor and needed fat for cooking and baking. Bacon drippings, the fat rendered after frying bacon, were collected and saved for reuse in frying vegetables, seasoning beans, or baking savory dishes. This leftover fat added a smoky richness to meals that butter sometimes could not provide. Using bacon drippings was economical, preventing waste and making the most of limited resources. Families learned to store drippings carefully, sometimes mixing them with other fats to stretch them further. This substitution became a staple of wartime kitchens, balancing scarcity with flavor. Today, it serves as a reminder that necessity often inspires delicious creativity, turning something left over into a prized cooking ingredient. Wrapping butter in wax paper for easier spreading was a practical tip that made cold butter easier to work with before the age of microwaves. Betty Crocker taught that wrapping sticks or blocks of butter tightly in wax paper and storing them in the fridge made the butter softer and easier to slice or spread directly on bread. The wax paper prevented the butter from absorbing unwanted fridge smells and also made it easy to unwrap small amounts without messy fingers. This was an important daily convenience for home cooks, especially when refrigeration was colder and butter was firmer than today. The tip helped keep butter fresh and ready for use while avoiding waste or spoilage. In modern kitchens, butter is often softened on the counter or melted, but this classic wrapping method remains an elegant solution for maintaining butter's best texture and flavor. Saving and reusing bacon grease in ceramic crocks beside the stove was standard kitchen practice that modernization nearly eliminated. Food writers and health advocates condemned the habit as unsanitary and unhealthy, promoting spray oils and margarine as cleaner alternatives. Bacon fat contains roughly 40% saturated fat, but also 45% monounsaturated oleic acid. the same compound that gives olive oil its health halo. The rendered fat proved remarkably stable, resisting oxidation that makes polyunsaturated vegetable oils go rancid and potentially harmful. Using bacon grease for frying eggs, seasoning beans, or starting gravies added depth of flavor no industrial product could match. The practice eliminated waste, stretched food budgets, and delivered genuine taste that made simple meals memorable. Families who never threw away bacon drippings were practicing sustainable cooking that modern chefs now celebrate. Cooking with pressure. Cookers for efficiency became a valuable trick during World War II when fuel and time were limited. Pressure cookers reduced cooking times drastically by trapping steam and raising the boiling point of water. This meant tougher cuts of meat and dried beans could be prepared quickly, saving both energy and precious time. Many families learned to use pressure cookers to stretch ingredients further, making dishes that would otherwise take hours on the stove. These pots also helped preserve nutrients that might be lost during longer cooking. The ability to prepare a hearty meal fast was essential when rationing limited both fuel and food. Pressure cookers became common in wartime kitchens, praised for their practicality and convenience. Today, while electric appliances have taken over, the principles of pressure cooking remain a reminder of how innovation met necessity. Using a pressure cooker was not just about speed, it was about making the most of scarce resources and easing daily burdens in difficult times. Canning leftover fruit juices into jellies without pectin was a homemade preservation trick popular before commercial pectins were widely available. Home cooks would collect juices from cooked fruits like apples, berries, or grapes and boil them with sugar until the mixture naturally thickened and set into jelly form. This process relied on the natural pectin content of the fruit or slow reduction to achieve the right consistency. Betty Crocker encouraged such resourceful methods to reduce waste and extend the use of precious fruit harvests, especially during the Depression and wartime. Families could preserve seasonal flavors in jars, creating sweet spreads that lasted months without refrigeration. This hands-on method required patience and careful temperature control, making it a prized skill among home canners. Though commercial pectins simplified jelly making later on, the traditional technique held a charm and authenticity that many modern cooks now seek to revive. It represents a time when food preservation was as much art as science. Home fermentation of vegetables was actively discouraged by food safety authorities during the 1960s, who warned families about botulism from homemade pickles and sauerkraut. Store-bought versions pasteurized with vinegar seemed safer and more reliable. Scientists now understand that traditional lactofermentation creates conditions where beneficial bacteria thrive while harmful pathogens cannot survive, producing probiotics that support immune function and digestive health in ways pasteurized products never can. The process preserved vegetables through winter while actually increasing their nutritional value, creating vitamins absent from fresh produce. Fermented foods populated the gut with diverse microorganisms now recognized as essential for mental health and weight regulation. Families who maintained crocks of fermenting cabbage weren't risking their health. They were cultivating living foods that modern probiotic supplements attempt to replicate at far greater expense. Making hobo stew with mixed vegetables and meat scraps was a one-pot meal that brought together whatever was on hand to feed families efficiently. This stew combined less desirable cuts of meat, leftover vegetables, and pantry staples simmered slowly to develop flavor and tenderness. The name reflected its humble origins, but the dish was hearty and comforting. Using a single pot minimized fuel usage and cleanup time, which were valuable considerations during wartime. The flexible recipe meant cooks could adapt it to what was available, reducing waste and stretching ingredients. Hobo stew embodied the spirit of making do with less and turning scarcity into sustenance. Its warming qualities made it a favorite in many homes, especially during cold months. Today, it stands as a symbol of resilience and practical cooking wisdom from a time when every morsel mattered. Using mayonnaise in cakes for moisture without butter was a surprising ingredient swap that kept cakes tender in ration or budget-conscious homes. During times when butter was expensive or scarce, Betty Crocker revealed that mayonnaise could replace butter or oil to maintain moistness and richness in baked goods. Since mayonnaise is mostly oil and eggs, it adds moisture and binding qualities that keep cakes soft without altering the flavor. This trick was a game changer for families struggling with limited ingredients but still wanting homemade treats. It was widely accepted because it used what was often on hand in the pantry, reducing waste and expense. The secret to success was not to overdo it, but to substitute carefully, following trusted recipes. Modern bakers who rediscover this hack can enjoy lighter, moist cakes without the saturated fat of butter. This forgotten method reminds us that everyday ingredients can have multiple clever uses. Using every part of the animal from snout to tail was considered primitive by 1960s, Americans enjoying post-war prosperity and supermarket convenience. Muscle meats became the only respectable protein, while bones, organs, and odd bits were discarded or hidden in pet food. Traditional butchery practices that utilized everything represented accumulated wisdom about nutrition that affluence carelessly abandoned. Bones provided minerals, collagen, and gelatin. Organs delivered concentrated vitamins impossible to obtain from muscle meat alone. Skin and cartilage supplied glycine and proline essential for joint health and tissue repair. Fat provided energy and fat-soluble vitamins in stable, usable forms. The nose-to-tail approach that seemed backward actually delivered complete nutrition that eating only boneless, skinless chicken breasts never could. Modern chefs now celebrate whole animal cooking as sophisticated gastronomy, but farm families and frugal grandmothers practiced it out of wisdom that science finally validates. Using leftover coffee grounds as a meat tenderizer was an unusual but surprisingly effective wartime kitchen hack. After brewing coffee, the spent grounds were saved instead of discarded, then used to tenderize tougher cuts of meat. The slightly abrasive texture helped break down fibers, while the natural acids in coffee softened the meat, improving texture and flavor. This trick allowed families to make the most of less expensive, tougher cuts, which were common during rationing. It was an easy, cost-free way to improve meals without needing special ingredients or equipment. The grounds could be rubbed directly onto meat or included in marinades, showing how every kitchen waste product was reimagined as a resource. This method reflected a larger trend of making do with what was available and finding hidden uses for ordinary items. Though it might sound strange today, it was one of many clever adaptations that helped stretch food budgets. It serves as a reminder that sometimes the simplest solutions can come from unexpected places. Using a cheese grater to shred cold butter for pastry dough was an old-fashioned hack for quick, flaky pie crusts. Instead of softening butter until spreadable, Betty Crocker advised grating cold butter directly into the flour, creating small, evenly distributed pieces that helped produce a tender and crumbly texture. This saved time and avoided melting the butter too much, which could ruin the delicate layers of pastry. It was especially useful in an era before stand mixers or food processors, giving home cooks an easy way to achieve professional results by hand. The grated butter mixed easily with flour, trapping air and moisture during baking to create flakiness. Though less common today with modern equipment, this technique remains a charming and effective method for those who prefer hands-on baking. It embodies the practical ingenuity Betty Crocker was famous for teaching. Drinking whole milk and eating full-fat dairy products was common practice before low-fat recommendations transformed the dairy case into a parade of skim and reduced-fat options. Parents were told that removing fat would make dairy healthier for growing children and weight-conscious adults. Decades of research now show that full-fat dairy consumers have lower rates of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease compared to those choosing reduced-fat alternatives. The natural fats in whole milk slow sugar absorption, provide fat-soluble vitamins in bioavailable forms, and signal satiety that prevents overeating. Removing fat concentrated the lactose sugar while eliminating the components that made dairy genuinely nourishing. Children raised on whole milk from the family cow or local dairy received complete nutrition that skim milk simply cannot provide. The fat phobia that transformed American dairy consumption may have contributed to the very health problems it claimed to prevent. Making fruit butter from overripe fruit was a smart way to turn imperfect or aging fruit into a delicious and long-lasting spread. Instead of letting fruit go to waste, Wartime cooks slowly cooked down overripe apples, peaches, or pears with just a small amount of sugar to create a thick, flavorful butter. The low sugar content was intentional, as sugar was rationed and often in short supply, so cooks had to find ways to sweeten food without using much of it. This spread could be used on bread, served with biscuits, or added to breakfast dishes, giving meals extra flavor and variety. The process also helped preserve the fruit for longer periods, making it a practical pantry staple. Families often experimented with whatever fruit was on hand, and the resulting fruit butters became a cherished way to stretch food supplies while still enjoying sweet flavors. Making fruit butter was a testament to the creativity in wartime kitchens, turning potential waste into something nourishing and tasty. This tradition carries on in many homes today, keeping the spirit of resourcefulness alive. Creating mock mayonnaise with egg yolk and vinegar was a wartime-era hack that helped households cope when commercial mayonnaise was scarce or rationed. This clever substitute involved whisking egg yolks with vinegar, oil, and seasonings to mimic the creamy texture and tang of real mayonnaise. Betty Crocker's cookbooks offered this recipe as an affordable and easy alternative that required only basic pantry ingredients. The mock mayo kept salads, sandwiches, and dressings flavorful during tough economic times and supply shortages. It was particularly useful when fresh eggs and vinegar were more available than processed condiments. This homemade version might not have had the exact consistency of store-bought mayo, but it delivered the essential taste and moisture needed in classic recipes. Today, recreating this old-fashioned substitute can connect modern cooks to a resourceful culinary tradition that made simple ingredients stretch farther while keeping meals delicious and familiar. Try one this week. Pick a jar and save the bacon grease. Soak the beans with a small spoon of baking soda. Drop clean eggshells into the soup pot the next time you simmer chicken. Eat what you make sitting down, away from the television. Tell me which one you remember from her kitchen. Because every one of these tricks got buried by a food company that needed her to buy something instead. The lab took 50 years to admit she had been right the whole time. Drop a comment with the one your family kept doing anyway.